What was your, going back to the early years, what was your family's heritage, Native American heritage?
Blackfoot and Cherokee. My dad was Blackfoot. My mom was half Cherokee.
So there were a lot of things going on when you were young that were...
Yeah. We weren't allowed to say we were Indian. Never mentioned being Indian. Because back then, you know, that was a bad thing to be. No one liked you. We're home. And these people come to the door and they said, "Is my mother there?" And I says, "Yeah." "Your father?" I said, "He's in the back room. Come on in." You know, we weren't allowed to let people in the house. I just told them, "Come on in." And said, "We're here to talk to you about your brother." And about that time, my folks come out in the living room and ran me up the hall to hold the other two kids back. And the conversation I heard was that they're here to come to take him back to Tibet to be educated. And my dad got upset about that. So what's wrong with the education here? Why would he want to go to Tibet? Because he's a chosen one, is the way they were putting it. And they were serious about taking him with them. And my folks, they just got fed up with it and ran him off. I didn't hear nothing else about that till a year later when they got a letter. And the letter stated that they're sorry that Buddha missed his opportunity to do this, and they'll check back in years, in the future. And as far as I know, they might have and might not have.
You ever see the film Little Buddha?
Yeah.
Was that kind of like?
Yeah. It was like that. That's when I first started thinking about this again, is when I seen that. And I thought, well, that's my brother. You know, and it can't be because the time periods are all wrong in this. And I'm thinking, maybe that could have been him up there. Maybe it should have been.
So when they came and they were talking to your folks, you were made to go away. And
yeah. I kept sneaking up the hall so I could hear it go from one door to the next, trying to hear what was going on. But they really shook my dad up. He got really upset, and my mom, she was basically laughing. She said, "This can't be real, candid camera, some stunt going on. Her brother put him up to it and stuff like that." But she checked, and as far as she knew, them people didn't exist to anybody in my family but Ronnie. He wanted to know who they were and what they wanted. He was scared of them. That I remember. He was scared because he wouldn't come down the hallway into the living room. He just went out the back door in the backyard and was looking through the sliding glass doors and trying to see what was going on. But no, there was no discussion. Anybody, none of my relatives, nobody. It was never brought up again, until that letter. And I think my sister may have it, because I know my mom kept it.
So it was like a letter from the Tibetan...
My mom and dad called him Buddha, Little Buddha. And that went on for several years. And then he opened a clinic or something in Oregon. And they called him the Messiah. He's opened up a clinic up in Oregon. He's the Messiah. And it was just a private joke between them two. I never knew what was going on, what they were talking about. But it's what these people, the Tibetans, had said to him while they were there. He's chosen for this, and he's supposed to do this and that. They were determined to get the point across to my folks that this is supposed to be, this has to be, and they weren't taking no for an answer. And there were these two old people in my living room arguing with my folks about taking my brother. And when they left, you could just tell they were looking for him, And as far as I thought, they were going to just go ahead and take him. But they really shook my dad up. But I didn't know what it was. You know, I didn't know Tibet or Dalai Lama or none of that stuff. None of us did. So it was, and I kept that story to myself till about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Discussed it with him when we first started talking again. I'd asked him, I said, do you remember that? He says, oh yeah, I remember it, but nobody else does. And I don't know if he thought it was a story that my mom had made up or if it actually happened, because he was really young at the time. And before, what was it? Before my dad died, he got in touch with him. He knew my dad was dying. Hadn't been in touch with him for years. But he just called and said, you know, I know Dad's dying, yada, yada. Because he's suffering strokes, daily strokes, and he had cancer, and he's just terminally ill. And everybody tried to find Buddha, you know, to let him know. And I've talked to everybody, and they said, no, we never got in touch with him. You know, how would he know what was going on? He knew the phone number, he knew the address, and what hospital he'd been in. He knew all three of them. I didn't even know them, you know.
When you were younger, were there things that you remember about
him being different?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was always different. He was always thinking. You know, he showed his intelligence way early when he was like 12, 13 years old. He was able to do things that other people couldn't do. But if you asked him for a hammer or a screwdriver, he wouldn't know the difference between them. But you could talk about a constellation in the sky, and he'd know what you were talking about. You know, no one never knew how he knew what he knew. You know, that was strange. And he wanted a sitar. He wanted to learn how to play sitar. I just learned when the Beatles come out what a sitar was, you know. And he wanted one of them, wanted to learn how to play it. He's always been intelligent. He's always been thinking ahead.
And that empathy, thinking about other people?
Yeah. He always wanted to help people. You know, I think that's how he got hooked up with these people, the Tibetans that came, because he just, you know, he talked to anybody. He was happy, he was go-lucky, and if you seemed interesting, he'd go talk to you. You know, find out, you know, what you are, whatever. If he'd have gone that way into the Indian nations, he'd probably be the greatest chief ever. You know, come to visit me in Las Vegas once and tried to hook him up with a job, but he wanted to go grow grass, not smoking grass, but the kind you eat. That
wheatgrass? Yeah.
He'd crush it up, put it in little shot glass deals, and sell it to the health food stores. He was making a fortune. You know, and I said, you're growing grass? He says, yeah, try it. And it became a big thing in Las Vegas for a while. Everybody got health conscious. But he started that. I think he helped start the first, I think it was a holistic restaurant where they just served sandwiches on everything organic. And back then, back in the 70s, organic, you know, didn't exist. No, I ain't eating that, you know. Got to have the chemicals. That's when I learned the word holistic. That's the thing he does there in Kathmandu. He feeds the people. He feeds them, clothes them, houses them. He just amazes me. No matter what he does, it's gonna turn out right, and something good's gonna come out of it. He likes to help people. He cares about people, And he's a no bullshit guy. You know, what he says, he means. And says this is going to happen, it happened. And I said, he just, when he talks, you listen. You want to hear more. You want to hear what he has to say. And he's always been that way. Always held a conversation in a group of people. Everybody would eventually be around him. What's going on? His policy, do no harm. We grew up in a violent family. You know, and there was always someone getting hurt or someone getting beat up or, you know, crap like that. But he back then he said, you know, why do we have to fight? You know, there's no reason to fight. I don't think he's been in maybe 2 fights in his whole life. But he, what was it? When I went to Vietnam, he kept telling me, why don't you go to Canada like everybody else? I don't want to. You know, Vietnam wasn't even a thing when I joined the service. It became a thing while I was in boot camp. That's when I learned about Vietnam. And by the time I got out of boot camp, he knew everything there was about Vietnam, about all the coups that's gone on there, and who the good guys were and who the bad guys were. And he flat told me, he says, you know, you're over there fighting a war against people that are defending their country. We're the invader. You know, and he put that out there, and it was a whole different concept. People weren't ready for that. And he had a couple rallies. Cesar Chavez spoke about him at one of his rallies. And I couldn't believe, here this guy from Mexico comes here trying to start a union for the Mexican laborers and get them decent pay, and he's talking about Buddha. You know, how he's seen through what he's done, what could be done. You know, they did a lot of tests in Davis University, and they tested a lot of monkeys, and he just couldn't see that happening. He always said, you know, one of these days I'm gonna let them monkeys out. Well, they got loose, but he'd be an advocate for something like that, for animals. Thanksgiving one year, we were having Thanksgiving dinner, and this big semi-truck come down our street, and no truck's supposed to be on that street. And Buddha went running out there and stopped the guy. You know, here's a little guy stopping this big 16-wheeler, and the guy says, what do you want? He says, you're not home having Thanksgiving dinner with your family? He said, no, gotta work. He said, wait here. He went inside, got a plate, and took it back out there and sat in the truck and ate with him. You know, that's the kind of character he was back there. That's a kid doing that. You know, and this guy was a stranger.
So you
as there are in 1,000 million worlds. So many times I make reverent salutations to all the Buddhas of the three eras, to the Sadharma, and to the excellent community. I pay homage to all the shrines and all the places in which the Bodhisattvas have been. I make profound obeisance to the teachers and to those whom respectful salutation is due. This very day, I go for refuge. To the powerful protectors whose purpose it is to guard the universe, the mighty conquerors who overcome suffering everywhere. Wholeheartedly also I take my refuge in the Dharma, which they have ascertained, which is the abode of security against the rounds of rebirth. Likewise, in the host of the Bodhisattvas, I take my refuge. To the Buddha, for refuge I go. To the Dharma, for refuge I go. To the Sangha, for refuge I go. To the Buddha, for refuge I go. To the Dharma, for refuge I go. To the Sangha, for refuge I go. To the Buddha, for refuge I go. To the Dharma, for refuge I go. To the Sangha, for refuge I go. To all the truth teachings of the past, to all the truth teachings yet to be, to all the truth teachings that are now, my worship flows unceasingly. No other refuge than the truth. Refuge supreme is there for me. By the virtue of this truth, may grace abound and victory.